Hi all, this is the badging video for the track saw here at MakeHaven. So the track saw lives right over here, and the track for it lives right on the wall. So the track saw is similar to a circular saw, except that it has a dedicated track that it rides along, and it has a plunging capability, which is pretty special. So taking it out, there are also two clamps in here for the track that live in the box, and the manual. So we'll go over the parts, there's just the manual in here. We also, just as a note, have one track for this right now. In the future we might get more track, in which case there will be a connecting component, and that will also live in the box. So on the track saw, we're going to go over some of the features. Here's obviously where you attach the vacuum. When you're using this inside in MakeHaven, you are obviously required to attach a shop vac or dust extractor to it so you don't have sawdust blasting everywhere. So in the normal mode, it's locked so that you can't plunge, you can't accidentally expose the blade, which is convenient. If you want to expose the blade, you can push this button forwards, and then to start the blade, obviously pull the trigger, but just to push the blade forwards, you would do that. You can also allow it to let you do that without pushing this by pulling this little trigger down. So now we can do that, and that's useful, as you'll see, for changing the blade. On the sides here, let's say you want to do a bevel cut, you can loosen here and loosen here, and now you can do all kinds of angles. For now, we'll just set it back to 0, making sure to tighten both. If you want to change the amount of blade that gets exposed, that's here, so you loosen this guy, and then you can set it to wherever you want. So say you want 1 inch exposed, then that's how much will get exposed. For now, we can just leave it all the way down. It goes to a little more than 2 inches. If we look on the back side, there's some things going on here. So these two knobs let you adjust how snugly this rides on the track. So we'll see that in a minute and adjust those. And then this is a cool feature. This is an anti-kickback feature. So here in this position, when this little hook is hooked on, then down here, the anti-kickback is retracted, so it won't do anything for you. When you release it, now move it all the way, so it's free, there's this little wheel exposed, and if the blade catches, which could happen for a lot of reasons, say you're overreaching, or the wood is really wet and so it binds on you, or you're trying to make a turn in your cut because you're off your line, there are a whole host of reasons why it could bind up. Then the motor stalls and it tries to overcome and push the blade through the wood and throw the tool back at you, then this will bind up on the track, preventing it from doing that. If that happens, then you need to turn this to get it to come off the track so you can release the tool. Here you can adjust the speed of the tool. To be honest, I think normally you just leave it at full speed at 5. I think there might be scenarios where you'd want to lower the speed, but I can't think of any great ones. Let me know in the comments or in person if you think of any. Here in the handle, which is kind of nifty, is the Allen key for changing the blade. So we'll look at that quickly. So let's say we want to change the blade. This button is pushed, so now we can plunge. I'll try to show you this. So after we plunge down, then this button, we're going to swing all the way over into this position. So now it's locked in the down position with the blade exposed, obviously the tool unplugged, and now we can push this button in. So this goes in, and this is the blade lock so that it can't spin on us. So when I'm pushing that button, it's locked. We can take this Allen key, and this is just a normally threaded one, so left and loosey, and unscrew this. So we'll spin this off. I'm still holding the button so it doesn't spin on us. And free, and this falls out. And then you can also see the riving knife here. I'll talk more about that in a second. So the blade comes out. This is a fairly high tooth count blade. Good for making nice, pretty cuts. And this can do cross-cutting, ripping, bevel cuts, all sorts of things. It is important if you get a new blade to make sure it's the right thickness. It needs to be a little bit wider than the riving knife. So this has a kerf of 0.086, so you need to make sure it's at least that wide, and a 6.5-inch diameter. So we'll put it back in, making sure that the arrow on the blade is matching the arrow here, so the teeth are spinning this way. And I'll slide it in gently to make sure that we don't hit any of these carbide teeth and damage them. You obviously don't want to do. Alright, and then this little guy has little registration pins. And this bolt. And we'll tighten that right back in. Okay. Then the riving knife, the purpose of that is to make sure that the blade runs really straight. This sits in the cut that the blade just made, so it acts kind of like the rudder on a boat if it was fixed in a straight position, so that it always runs really straight and it keeps the wood open after it's gone through the cut. So I'm going to push down on this button again to lock it, just like that, and then give it a little extra torque, and then put this right back in the handle so you don't lose this guy. And now we can release this. So we'll swing this back over to this position, and now we can just push a little on here, and this rises right back up. Alright, so the tool is now ready to use, so I'll go grab the track so we can see what that looks like. Alright, so here is the track. It has rubbery grip on the bottom so that it has a nice grip on the wood. You can see here there's no clamps on it, but it's really doing a great job of holding. We do also have the clamps that you can use to clamp your the track down to the table or the wood. Sort of your choice whether or not you use it. Some things that aren't your choice, this can only be used on wood. No laminates, other weird things that aren't wood. Obviously plywood's okay, but nothing, I don't know, weird. Make sure not to cut the power cord. Fairly obvious, but make sure the power cord is well out of the way when you're cutting. You want about 1/2 of a blade's thickness exposed when you're cutting, so just a little bit exposed. If you are cutting something on sawhorses or some kind of scenario like that, you need to make sure that all the pieces are supported. So if you're cutting through a piece of wood like this, on sawhorses you can't just cut down the middle because it'll fall down onto the blade. So you need to make sure to have both sides be fully supported so when you cut, they don't want to fall anywhere. Something else to bear in mind is that this blade is cutting upwards, so you want the finish, the pretty side of your piece of wood to be facing down. That's the side that will have less splintering. So on here, there's this rubber track, and this sits right next to the blade, and the reason we know it's right next to the blade is we're actually going to cut it with the saw so that we know that the rubber matches where the edge of the saw is, so it will help support the wood. So that helps to reduce splintering, but all the same, the top will have more splintering than the bottom. So we'll drop the tool on the track here, and we can actually see, I'll bring the camera around, you can see the anti-kickback in action here. If you see this little guy spinning, and then I try to go backwards, it's not letting that happen. Backwards is not happening. Then if we spin this, so I'll take this off and turn it to engage here. Now that's deactivated and we can go back and forth no problem. But we will leave our kickback friend activated. Then when we put this on, it feels pretty darn snug right now. I don't feel any play, but if there was, then we would loosen these screws with a flathead screwdriver right here and here, and then you can tighten down on this, and we can look at the bottom, see what's going on, and if you do that, it adjusts the position of this little guy. It'll push it outwards a little bit to get it right snug up on the track. So the tool can cut on either side of this track. So you can have it facing this way, or you can flip it around and face the other way, which is obviously pretty convenient. Please don't cut the tables here at MakeHaven. So hopefully it should go without saying, but please don't do that. So if you want to make a cut like this, then you would have your piece of wood hanging over the edge of the table so that the blade coming out the bottom is not cutting the table. So we'll do that here so you can see what that looks like. Scrap piece of wood, but we'll do the trick for this. And because it's a little floppy, I'm going to use these clamps to make sure that it sits a little bit nicer. So the clamps slide right in the bottom of the track, just like this, which is pretty neat, so they can slide along the length of the track and then not interfere with the top of it. And we're just going to expose the edge of the board, like so. And then I'm going to clamp down underneath so that they don't go anywhere. And what we would do is for this it doesn't matter so much, but you'd put marks on your piece of wood where you want it to go, and you line up the edge of the rubber with your marks, and that's exactly where it's going to cut. Now, because this is our first cut, the rubber hasn't been trimmed to our blade. Different blades have different thicknesses, different widths, so technically if you want it to be really dead on, the edge of the rubber corresponds to the blade that you're using. So since we need to trim the rubber first, it doesn't really correspond to anything here, so we're not going to put marks on. Here we go. So I have these clamps in a position where they can grab both the table and the piece of and the track and the piece of wood all sort of pinched in there. So it's doing a great job of holding it all flat and exposing our edge to cut. So here's the end of our dust extractor, and I'm just sticking that right in the end here, so it's a nice snug fit with that rubber end of the hose, and plug this in right over here. Okay, nice long cord, and the blade is on the right side, so we're going to cut this way, going across. I'm going to make sure the cord is not in the way. Drop you on. Now we're going to set the depth of the blade. So starting over here, we're going to plunge down. I'm not pulling the trigger, just pushing this guy forwards. And we're going to go just a little bit deeper than our piece of wood, and then set our dead stop. Just to there. So I'm just pulling it up to where it stops, and now it will stop there every time. Right now it's hitting the rubber, but we're going to trim the rubber, so it won't do that. So I'm going to just do some final checks, make sure that our speed is all the way up. I'm going to turn the dust collector on, and then we're going to start with a plunge, and then cut forwards. I'm going to start off the end of the track so that we can trim the full length of plastic. To do that I have to go backwards, so I'm going to disengage our kickback mechanism so that I can go backwards, come off the piece, and take this off so it doesn't fall off on me. Alright, so now I'm going to push the safety forwards, push down. Blade is fully protected, which is nice. Now this is a piece of plywood, but you can use the track saw for a lot of things. One is if you have a live edge piece of wood, a long piece of lumber that has edges that are wavy and so it'd be hard to joint or put on a table saw. You can put the track down on it wherever you want and run the track saw along the length, and then you have your piece of wood with a straight edge that you can then run against the fence of the table saw or in the jointer or wherever you want. So that's about all there is to it. When you're done, obviously make sure to clean up. You can see that the Shop Vac dust extractor did a great job, but I'm just going to turn it back on and clean up to make sure the inside, especially these rubber bits, is cleaned up nicely. The track clamps go back in here in the box. The track gets hung up on the wall, and then the tool obviously gets wrapped up nicely, put in the box, and back in its spot, and then vacuum up and sweep up just like you would normally. Thanks for watching.